Number 10. The glowing turtle. In 2015, while on an expedition to the Solomon Islands, researchers with the American Museum of Natural History witnessed for the first time a glowing turtle. That's right, a turtle that actually was able to glow in the dark. Could you imagine? If you saw a turtle like that, you'd probably think it was radioactive, right? But it actually wasn't. The researchers had initially been hunting for biofluorescent corals, but what they discovered instead was that the ordinary hawksbill sea turtle actually glows at night. They were about 65 feet deep when suddenly a glowing turtle floated by like a bright green and red spaceship, as described by museum research associate David Gruber. The scientists have since deducted that the turtles themselves probably don't glow, but the algae which lives on their shells does. Glowing algae is rare, but not unheard of. A number of microorganisms can light up when they are disturbed. As for the hawksbill sea turtle, not a whole lot is known about their existence on our planet, other than that they are currently critically endangered. We only found out a handful of years ago that they glow in the dark, and now we're at risk of losing them altogether. Number 9. The oldest turtle. The world's oldest turtle is not actually a turtle at all, but a tortoise. His name is Jonathan, and he hatched in 1832. He's a Seychelles giant tortoise who was brought to St. Helena in 1882 and given over to the governor of St. Helena, where he lived at the plantation house and was cared for by the government. He still lives there today and has outlived everyone who was at Plantation House when he first arrived. He is currently 189 years old, and he had his first picture taken in 1886. That's older than any human, by far, and means that Jonathan the tortoise has been alive since before we had cars, light bulbs, and of course computers. This tortoise has seen wars, technological advances, and shifts in society that you couldn't even imagine. And even though Jonathan is the oldest tortoise in the world still living, the record of the tortoise who lived the longest life goes to Adwaita, the Aldabra giant tortoise, who died in 2006 after living for 255 years, though this has not been 100% verified. Jonathan is currently blind and has cataracts. He doesn't have a sense of smell anymore, and he's unable to detect food. In the wild, it might be the end for poor old Jonathan, but he's kept in good care. The only thing he still has going is an excellent sense of hearing, and thanks to his caring providers, he's given the best food every day to prolong his life. He's also kept in better health than most people, and he's almost 200 years old. Number 8. The Mata Mata turtle. The Mata Mata turtle is such a bizarre and strange animal that it's probably a little more famous than a lot of people think. It's often referred to as the weirdest turtle in the world, with an extraordinary length of up to nearly 20 inches. The turtle is flat with a large triangular head. It has a wide mouth, tiny little eyes, and a thick neck covered in fringes. The Mata Mata turtle looks like something out of the Stone Age. These amazing turtles live primarily in the Amazon, at the very bottom of rivers and streams hiding in the mud. They can live for up to 75 years. They spend most of their lives not moving at all, and they eat food by sucking up fish with their huge mouth just like a vacuum. They're kind of like a scary sea monster that could bite off your foot if you're not careful. In the world of turtles, the Mata Mata is one of a kind. Number 7. The Two-Headed Turtle. The oldest two-headed turtle is named after the Roman god of two faces, Janus. Janus is a Greek turtle who migrated to Switzerland and managed to become a mascot for the Museum of Natural History in Geneva. The story of Janus is nothing short of unbelievable. As a Greek tortoise, his life expectancy was 125 years from birth. But unfortunately, Janus was born with a strange medical condition that saw him having two heads. That's right, like a mythical hydra, this animal lives with two heads. Scientists are still trying to decide whether to classify him as two conjoined turtles rather than one turtle with two heads. What do you think? This turtle literally has two heads like some kind of monster. In the wild, Janus would have died for sure, but he was rescued back in 1997 and is still alive today. He became the longest living two-headed Greek turtle in recorded history and is a testament to just how well wildlife and animals can fare when humans lend a helping hand. And if you were wondering, yes, both of his heads do indeed work. He likes to munch on lettuce with both of his mouths. Do you own a tortoise or a turtle? What kind? And what's it like? Tell me about it in the comments section below. Then, remember to subscribe to Epic Wildlife if you haven't already for more awesome videos just like this one. Number 6. The giant tortoise. Turtles used to be a lot bigger. 2 million years ago, there was a giant tortoise living in Europe that would make the largest turtles and tortoises on our Earth look like little babies. It is known as the Titanocelon, and it would have been about twice the size of a modern Galapagos giant tortoise, with a shell almost 7 feet long. Paleontologists recently came across a thigh bone and toe bone belonging to one of these ancient tortoises, and they dated the bones at being just 2 million years old. The bones were found inside of an ancient hyena den, and according to one of the lead researchers on the project, the giant tortoises have probably been scavenged once already dead, seeing as there was no way a gang of hyenas could have possibly taken on a 7-foot tortoise. What's even more interesting is that the pressure from predators could have been one of the main factors that caused the giant tortoise to evolve such a big body. To keep themselves safe from the enormous predators millions of years ago, they were forced to grow bigger and bigger until they had huge suits of armor to protect them. Sometime between then and now, the turtles lost about half their size. Number 5. Big-headed turtle. The big-headed turtle is one of the lesser known turtles in the world, and also one of the strangest and coolest. Just like the name suggests, this turtle's head is disproportionately large to its body. Unlike other turtles, this big-headed turtle has a melon so large that it can't pull it all the way into its shell. The turtle still has thick armor plating, but the plating actually extends to the top and sides of its head, giving it an enormous armored skull for protection. Also, the big-headed turtle has a weirdly long tail. It's not clear what the tail is used for, seeing as it's a really awful swimmer. Even more interesting is that the big-headed turtle is only one of its kind. It's the only species inside of its family, and it is 100% unique, representing an evolutionary branch over 75 million years old. The big-headed turtle diverged from any other turtle species even before the dinosaurs went extinct. Unfortunately, like many of the other turtles on the list today, this one is threatened because of excess hunting and the illegal pets trade. It's currently listed as endangered. Number 4. Spiny turtle. The spiny turtle actually lives in many of the same environments as the big-headed turtle, including Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and other places in Southeast Asia. But unlike the big-headed turtle, the spiny turtle can indeed hide its head inside of its shell. It's actually quite a shy turtle, and it's known as spiny because of all the spikes and edges along its shell. Some people even call it the cogwheel turtle because of how rough its carapace is. It kind of looks like a saw blade, though not quite as extreme. The spiny turtle lives an exceptionally secluded life, usually hiding out around small streams in areas 3,000 feet above sea level. It's made a habit of staying away from people, and this has definitely helped it to stay alive. According to Thai national parks, nothing is even known about the nesting behaviour of these turtles in the wild, though they believe it could be triggered by rain. These sneaky turtles are endangered, but hopefully their isolation will keep them from moving any closer to extinction. Number 3. The bog turtle. The bog turtle is definitely the cutest turtle on the list today. It is the smallest turtle found anywhere in the United States, with the largest one on record only being about 4.5 inches. The bog turtle is easy to tell apart from other turtles because it's tiny, it's adorable, and it has a patch of orange on the side of its head. The bog turtle is the rarest and least seen turtle in all of the United States, and there are strict laws in place forbidding any collection of these cute reptiles. The government is actually doing quite a lot to try and keep them alive. They can be found throughout the entirety of the eastern United States, from New York all the way to South Carolina. The population is unknown, but there are estimated to be between 2,500 and 10,000 left. The only bad news is that most of their habitat has been fragmented because of road and human development, and now they have a limited ability to migrate from one habitat to another. If you were wondering why they're called bog turtles, it's because they love living in bogs. Specifically, these turtles love mountain bogs, but they'll settle for any wetland with thick moss and deep, slimy layers of mud and muck. Number 2. The extinct tortoise. A recent expedition to the Galapagos Islands resulted in the amazing and unbelievable discovery of a giant tortoise that has been believed extinct for over 100 years. Conservationists and people all over the world got very excited after an adult female Fernandina giant tortoise was discovered inside of her natural habitat on Fernandina Island. The discovery was made with the help of the Giant Tortoise Restoration Initiative and the Galapagos Conservancy. This goes to show that no matter how close an animal comes to extinction, they can always be brought back from the edge. The last time one of these turtles was spotted on Fernandina Island was back in 1906. Just like the other giant tortoises in the area, this species can live for over 200 years. Even more amazing is that after additional investigating, it was found that there could be even more tortoises on the island. They may just have been hiding exceptionally well. However, scientists are still waiting for genetic confirmation on the tortoises' lineages, as they need to make sure that it is indeed a proper Fernandina tortoise and not just an ordinary non-extinct tortoise that swam over from a different island. Sometimes, a tortoise or a lizard will fall off the island they live on and be swept to a different island. This is actually how a lot of the evolution happened to the Galapagos Islands, and how much of the biodiversity was formed. Number 1. The Mary River Turtle. The Mary River Turtle is also known as the punk turtle because it sports a bright green mohawk that makes it look like it's part of a punk band. These turtles can be found in Australia. They have the weird ability of breathing through their genitals, and they are one of the most endangered reptiles in the world. That's right, these are by far the most bizarre looking turtles you've ever seen, though you definitely won't be able to adopt any as a pet. This is also one of the oldest living turtle species on Earth. According to Marilyn Connell from the Charles Darwin University, to find the closest related species of the Mary River turtle, you have to go back 50 million years. These turtles are extremely old. They used to be popular pets in Australia, but ever since Australia outlawed them as private pets, their numbers have been dwindling. They have no protected habitat, and it looks like after 50 million years of survival, these fascinating punk turtles could be wiped off the map. Scientists don't actually know how many of them are left. And if you were wondering why exactly they have such cool hairdos, their green mohawk is actually algae that grows on the top of their head. Number 10. Prehistoric freak fish. In Washington, some fishermen recently pulled out what can only be described as a prehistoric fish freak out of the water. Two commercial fishermen were looking for carp when a pair of crazy-looking fish swam right into their nets. These fish were about 3 feet long and obviously not native to the area. But where did they come from? Scientists can't definitively prove anything. What we do know is that they had sharp teeth in their mouths, they looked dangerous, and after a bit of investigating, it turned out that they were alligator gars, a weird species of fish native to the other side of the country. These vicious marine animals can reach up to 10 feet in length and are typically found in Florida and Mexico. So did they really make their way through the Panama Canal to get across the Pacific Ocean? That seems totally impossible. Nobody knows how these bizarre creatures ended up in Washington, but the fishermen were so freaked out that they put the fish back in the water. The most popular theory of how they ended up in Washington in the first place is that someone had probably been keeping them in their aquarium, but they got so big, so they were tossed into the river. Number 9. Horrifying monster pleco. A fisherman recently caught something that looked like a four-eyed alien from another dimension. This bizarre fish came out of the water somewhere in Latin America, with what appeared to be wings, with hairy stubble around its mouth as if it had a beard, and with 2 unknown appendages sticking out of its face. The fish looked like something out of a person's worst nightmare, and it turned out to be some kind of monster pleco fish. Somehow, it got bigger and bigger, and now it looks like a disturbing creature from a horror movie or another planet. The video of its capture was uploaded online, and you can clearly hear the fisherman telling his friends that he had caught something from out of space. Nobody knew what this thing was. And even though it did appear to be some kind of pleco, which is a group of armoured catfish, its exact species is still unknown. It could have been that the fisherman caught a very rare kind of pleco not usually seen, or the pleco could have somehow been a mutant. Mutant fish aren't as rare as you might think. They pop up now and again, washed on the shore or in fishermen's nets. It's not surprising that this freaky pleco showed up on a video recently. Number 8. The long-nosed chimera. Gary Goodyear was absolutely shocked when he pulled from the water an extremely rare and strange creature known as a long-nosed chimera. Gary made this bizarre catch when fishing off the Grand Banks of Newfoundland in Canada. He had his net about 460 fathoms deep, over 2,600 feet. Once he reeled his net into his boat, the fish came flopping out of it. And according to Gary himself, he first thought it was a platypus because of its long, flat snout. It looked like it was made of rubber and appeared to have wings. Nobody on board the fishing vessel could identify the dead monster. Even after Gary unloaded his catch and showed his strange fish to the workers at the nearby fish plant, they couldn't identify the beast either. It wasn't until he posted the photos on Facebook that people pointed out that he had captured a long-nosed chimera. And in this case, Gary was very lucky that he wasn't injured. These kinds of fish have spines with venom in them, meaning that one wrong touch could have injected Gary with a lethal dose of venom. Of course, he didn't know that, because not too many people know much about this particular creature. Unfortunately, not much is known about these weird animals, as they live deep underwater. According to CBC News, these ancient fish typically live almost 10,000 feet below the surface of the water, which is definitely why none of the fishermen had ever seen one before. Have you ever gone fishing and found something you couldn't identify? How big was it? What did you end up doing with it? Tell me about your strange catches in the comments section below. Then, remember to subscribe to Epic Wildlife if you haven't already for more intense videos just like this one. Number 7. The Deadly Grouper. A man in Florida recently reeled in the largest grouper you've ever seen. This was a Warsaw grouper, and it weighed a whopping 300 pounds. This supersized fish was caught in the Gulf of Mexico, and it's known among fishermen as one of the hardest creatures to hook with a fishing rod. But not only is it hard to hook, it's almost impossible to reel in because of its strength and bulk. Nonetheless, pro fisherman Joshua Jorgensen managed to reel in the biggest fish of his life off the coast of Fort Myers in a battle that went on for over 20 minutes and involved over 400 feet of fishing line. When the fish was finally on the boat, it was over twice the weight of the fisherman who'd caught it, and it had spines that were over 2 feet long sticking out of its back. Once they returned to shore, the giant fish had to be taken off the boat with a tractor. Could you imagine being on a tractor carrying a giant sea creature? Now that would be an experience worth taking photos of. Number 6. The Prehistoric Beast. In 1977, a monstrous carcass was reeled in by a Japanese fishing trawler off the coast of New Zealand, and ever since then it has been known as the Zuio Maru carcass. After its initial discovery, people insisted that it was not a fish or a whale, but instead some kind of sea monster or even sea dragon that had decomposed underwater. This is because when it was hoisted out of the sea, it looked like it had wings and a large neck like a dragon. It definitely didn't look like a fish or whale, and certainly not like any kind of giant squid. It was later suggested that the Japanese trawler had accidentally reeled in the decomposed body of a prehistoric plesiosaur, an ancient marine reptile that once ruled the world. But unfortunately, the carcass that had captured the world's imagination ended up not being very strange. Recent science revealed that the carcass was probably that of a basking shark. This happened after an analysis compared amino acids in the muscle tissue and discovered the true identity of the mysterious monster. Scientists also know now that decomposing basking sharks lose much of their shape and form, causing them to look like soggy dragons when they're pulled out of the water. If I found that shark though, I'd be pretty terrified myself, to be honest. Number 5. An Indonesian sea mutant. In Indonesia, a fisherman found the strangest fish, or fish-like monster, in human history. He discovered what turned out to be a mutated baby shark with a face that resembled that of a human. This deformed creature had what appeared to be eyes underneath its snout, making it look like some kind of malformed fantasy monster. According to the Daily Mail, the mutant baby shark was caught after the fisherman accidentally reeled in an adult shark. When he cut the adult shark's stomach open, there were 3 babies inside. 2 of them were completely normal, but the third one had a pair of eyes under its nose, which was likely the result of a birth defect that distorted the baby shark's features. Ever since his weird discovery, the man has kept the mutant shark to himself. He's preserved it and kept it on display in his house and refuses to hand it over to anyone. His neighbours are even trying to buy the shark from him, but the man's convinced that if he keeps the mutant in his house, it will bring him good luck. Number 4. An Unruly Croc. In Australia's Northern Territory, a fisherman got the surprise of his life when he accidentally reeled in a monstrous giant crocodile while simply trying to catch some fish. The giant crocodile bit onto the man's lure and refused to let it go. The crocodile was trying to eat his lure, or maybe it was actually trying to pull the fisherman into the water and eat him as a snack. The poor fisherman had to fight with the crocodile for what felt like an eternity until the lure eventually broke free and the angry croc swam away, probably upset that it didn't get an easy meal. This just goes to show that when you're fishing in Australia, you never know what kind of giant predator is going to turn up on the end of your line. Australia is full of bizarre predators. You may think that you're the one fishing, but actually the crocs are out fishing for you. Number 3. The snake pig. A farmer in a remote Vietnamese village recently caught a fish with the head of a snake, the body of an eel, and the tongue of a pig. It was some kind of mutant snake-pig-fish hybrid, and it was discovered while the farmer was pumping water out of a nearby spring. The weird animal was hiding inside the moist mud under the water, and it was such a strong opponent that it took the fisherman and 2 of his neighbours 30 minutes to get the fish out of the mud and back onto the shore. Nobody in the village had ever seen anything like it, nor had any of the fishermen in the area. Some thought it might be a catfish, some claimed it could be a type of snakehead fish, while others just thought it was a mutant eel. The fish was about 3 feet long, and witnesses claimed that its weirdest feature was its pig tongue. Nobody knows where the fish came from, and to this day, not a single other specimen like it has been found in the area. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if it was a strange mutation caused by radiation or other chemicals that were added to the water. Number 2. The northern snakehead. The northern snakehead fish is the most hated fish in America, and it was recently discovered swimming in the waters of Georgia, prompting fear and panic among the local fishermen. In fact, the Georgia Department of Natural Resources recently said that the snakehead first entered the United States as an invasive species between the 1990s and 2000s, and that in 2019 they finally caught the first specimens living in Georgia. These fish can grow to be almost 3 feet long, they're vicious, they are threatening to destroy the local fish population, and they are some of the only fish in the world that have a kill immediately order attached to them. United States officials are urging fishermen to kill all the northern snakehead fish they find anywhere in the country, as if left unchecked, the northern snakehead fish could literally eat the rivers of America dry, erasing all other fish breeds. If you're wondering just how such a volatile fish even exists, it's because they're native to places like Russia and China, where the ecosystems have evolved to hold them, and when they aren't the only predators. In the United States, the northern snakehead is an unrelenting menace. Number 1. The giant talking catfish. One of the most disturbing fish ever pulled out of the water was the giant talking catfish. This creepy fish was caught by a hobbyist visiting the Amazon basin, and it looks like something that belongs in a horror movie. Talking catfish can be found throughout Brazil and Colombia, as well as Ecuador and Peru. The species can grow to be over 2 feet in length, but it looks too creepy to catch on purpose. The giant talking catfish has the typical whiskers that you would find on any other catfish, except that it has a yellow and black shell that makes it look like something that should be swimming with dinosaurs. It definitely looks prehistoric. And even though this might be a rare fish for a visitor to catch in an Amazonian river, they are farmed by local commercial fisheries and even sold as pets to people with large, very expensive aquariums. Number 10. Raising a wolf. A family of farmers living in Russia accidentally stumbled upon a lair of wolves back in 2017. The wolves in the lair were all pups, and the farmers were planning to put the wild animals down. Before they could, a man named Ivan purchased one of the wolf cubs and decided to raise it as his own. Today, Ivan still lives with the wolf, whom he named Sergei. They live in Volgograd, along with Ivan's daughter, who happens to be a dog trainer and helps care for the rambunctious wolf. While most people might be too scared to have a wolf in their home, these guys absolutely love it, though it definitely is a lot of work. And not even 3 years old, Sergei weighed 100 pounds and demanded a seriously active lifestyle. The wolf needs to walk every day, regardless of weather, and actually behaves almost like an ordinary dog. The biggest differences are that Sergei eats a lot of meat and chicken every day and can't stomach dog food, and he doesn't exactly play well with others. However, for such a scary animal, Ivan apparently trained Sergei to open windows and even turn on light switches. Could you imagine trying to break into a house only to find a massive wolf there guarding the property? They don't mess around in Russia, and I would never in my wildest dreams try to rob any house in a place like that. Number 9. Hissing cockroach. The Madagascar hissing cockroach is one of the most disgusting and creepy pets that a person can have. To be quite honest, most people would never consider keeping a cockroach as a pet, but the Madagascar hissing cockroach takes it to an even higher level of disgusting. These cockroaches are enormous. They originate from the island of Madagascar and are one of the biggest species of cockroach in the world. The only good thing about them is that they don't have wings. They can't fly around freaking people out. However, they are excellent climbers. If you have Madagascar hissing cockroaches in your house, they could be climbing all over your walls and windows. It's pretty nasty. Perhaps the scariest part about the Madagascar hissing cockroach is the hissing part. They have special tubes that they use for breathing, which also allow them to make a loud hissing noise whenever they feel disturbed. Even more creepy is that large colonies of these cockroaches have been known to hiss like some kind of gross insect choir for a reason that researchers don't even know. And believe it or not, these are in fact popular pets with those who have an affinity for insects. Number 8. Polar bear. It seems like having a bear for a pet would be a pretty bad idea, and yet there is a man named Mark Dumas who basically has a polar bear pet. Mark and his wife, Dawn, work at Beyond Just Bears in Canada, where they keep an 800-pound polar bear as a pet. Of course, the bear is still a wild animal, but he's also part of their family. The polar bear's name is Aggie, and he's quite famous. He's starred in all kinds of high-budget movies, and he's spent his entire life living with Mark. The pair have developed a very strong relationship that allows Mark to swim with the polar bear, to give him bear hugs, and to treat him like an oversized dog. In all their years together, Aggie has never bitten anyone or been overly aggressive. Bears are obviously quite dangerous in the wild, but when you raise one from a baby, it's a whole different story. According to Mark, most polar bears only live for between 15 and 20 years in the wild, but Aggie is already 23 years old. She's basically a grandmother at this point. He's hoping that she'll live at least another 10 years, giving them more time to spend together as a family. Have you ever encountered a polar bear in the wild? I would hope not. They can be extremely aggressive and dangerous. If you have, leave a comment below with your experience. Then, remember to subscribe to Epic Wildlife if you haven't already for more wild videos just like this one. Number 7. King Cobra. There is a man named Abu Zarin Hussein, and he loves his pet snakes. Particularly, he adores his 14-foot king cobras, which by the way are the deadliest snakes in the entire world. The snake charmer plays football with his cobras and even reads them a bedtime story before going to sleep. And this is all despite the fact that he has been bitten several times by the cobras, with one especially nasty bite leaving him in a coma. Abu is in his 30s and lives in Malaysia, and he apparently became a specialist snake handler to follow in his father's footsteps. If you're wondering what exactly this guy does with his cobras, he brings them with him to training courses to teach firemen how to properly tame and handle snakes. He also operates briefings to the public on the dangers of snakes. But in his spare time, he just kinda hangs out with them. And even after having most of the skin on his right arm fall off after being injected with venom from the bite of one of his cobras, Abu says he'll stay with them for life. Number 6. The giant rat. Some people are horrified by the idea of having a pet rat. But if you think a normal sewer rat is scary, just take a look at the capybara, which is basically a rat that weighs 140 pounds. These weird rodents may look cute to some people, but to others they are just big scary rats. The truth is that the capybara, which is a native animal of South America, is basically a miniature cow. It's the largest rodent in the world. It has a square head, and it always looks like it's plotting something. Capybaras are becoming increasingly popular with exotic pet owners, and they are pretty easy to care for, other than the fact that they are disgusting and eat their own poop. If you don't like the idea of a rodent in your house, a capybara is probably a bad idea. And as an interesting fact, according to The Verge, capybaras are known to spend so much time in the water that in the 1700s, the Pope declared them a type of fish and told everyone that they could eat capybara during Lent. But of course, these aren't fish. Number 5. Hitler's alligator. An alligator that apparently belonged to Hitler himself died recently at a zoo in Moscow at the age of 84. This was reported by the New York Post in late 2020. The gator's name was Saturn. Saturn had been born in Mississippi back in 1936 before being gifted to the Berlin Zoo, then at some point transferred into Hitler's private collection. And let me tell you, if this evil man was the kind of guy who wanted an alligator as a pet, you might want to reconsider your interest in owning one of these hungry reptiles. Alligators are scary enough as it is, without being associated with the terrifying Nazi regime. Saturn was rescued from Germany by British soldiers after World War II, and then given over to the Russians, who kept the gator at a local zoo for over 70 years. Imagine that, just walking into a zoo in Moscow and seeing an alligator that was still technically a prisoner of war. Though, I imagine that Saturn the alligator was quite happy to be in the zoo for his adult life. Now that the alligator has died, he's being stuffed and put on display, though it's not clear just what exactly the alligator might represent for the Russian people. Number 4. Leech keepers. Leech keepers are some of the bravest pet owners in the world. Leech keepers are people in charge of caring for leeches, basically making these slimy creatures their pets. And as a way of feeding their disgusting pets, leech keepers allow the parasites to slurp out their blood like vampires. According to Daily UK News, there is an increasing number of people who are keeping giant leeches as personal pets, and in order to feed their slimy friends, they simply let them suck out their blood. The breed of choice for pet owners is the buffalo leech, which originates in Southeast Asia and can grow to be an outstanding 2 feet in length. The only good thing about owning a giant leech is that they only need to be fed once every 3 to 6 months. Some breeds can even go a full year without eating. This means that leech keepers have minimum maintenance when it comes to caring for their pets. A quick blood-sucking session twice a year and no expensive food bills. It's definitely cheaper than a dog, but it's infinitely more terrifying. Number 3. Vultures. Out of all the birds you could possibly have as a pet, a vulture is probably the worst choice. Vultures are horrifying animals that typically feed on dead carcasses. They are ugly, they're known as harbingers of death, and they even have something similar to acid inside of their droppings. They stink, they don't learn tricks, and oh yeah, they also have a special acid in their guts that is similar to battery acid, allowing them to eat anything they want. They can feast on meat that has been rotting for some time and not feel a thing. They're really not normal animals at all. A group of vultures is known as a venue, and vultures circling the air are called a kettle. And while these aren't really casual pets, they are prolific all throughout the United States and are sometimes rescued by people who don't quite know what they're doing. Though, I have to ask what these people were thinking, adopting an animal like the vulture. Wouldn't you rather have a nice parrot, or even some chickens? If you happen to find a baby vulture without its mother, it's best just to leave it alone, as it's a scary pet to have and will ultimately try to ruin your life. These birds are better left in the wild or handed over to an animal sanctuary. Number 2. The pit bull. One of the scariest pets a person can have is a pit bull. It's true that these dogs can be sweet and lovable, but there's no doubt that pit bulls are responsible for more dog attacks on humans than any other breed. Pit bulls are notorious for attacking children, babies, their owners, strangers, and even the elderly. A 5-year-old boy was attacked by his family's pit bull in February of 2020 and barely survived. Then later on in February 2020 again, a 7-year-old girl was bitten in her face when she tried to give some money to a homeless woman who happened to have a pet pit bull. And again in February, a grown man died after his pit bull went wild inside of his home and attacked 4 people. The dog was so dangerous that police were forced to shoot the animal upon their arrival. Suffice to say, when it comes to dogs, pit bulls are by far the scariest. Number 1. Giant centipedes. Giant centipedes might not be the most dangerous insects in the world, but they are definitely some of the scariest pets that a person can own. There's nothing more disturbing than imagining a slimy centipede with 46 legs and a dark red body climbing up your back in the middle of the night. It's gross, and yet many people love keeping these predatory insects as pets. Centipedes can live for up to 5 to 6 years in captivity and mainly eat frogs, birds, and lizards. These things are huge, growing to be up to about a foot long. But just wait, because centipedes can also be very dangerous. Centipedes are poisonous, they are ill-tempered, and they can be highly aggressive. If you happen to stick your hand into a centipede's tank, it could bite you, and this could cause you to come down with a fever and have extreme pain. To be quite honest, you would be better off with a pet tarantula than a giant centipede. Number 10. Chupacabra. The chupacabra may have just been spotted in Texas. A man witnessed a creature looking like the legendary chupacabra skulking through West Houston. The sighting of the animal was caught on camera, and it seems to show a skinny, dog-like monster hurrying through a residential neighborhood as quickly as its freaky little legs could carry it. Some people have denounced the possibility of the animal being a monster, claiming that it was probably just a mangy dog or a sick coyote. But if you look closely enough, it definitely looks like a mythical blood-sucking creature. Of course, skeptics immediately call something like this fake, but those who believe will tell you that it's evidence of the mythical beast that has been noted to suck the blood out of goats and other farm animals in the depth of night. Of course, the mythical chupacabra has been a legend primarily in places like Mexico and Puerto Rico, so it's definitely rare to see it in Texas. Perhaps it crossed the border while no one was watching. This is one of those animals that biologists are adamant doesn't exist. And while they may be right, sightings like this really do make you question. The chupacabra is undoubtedly real, it just might be a mangy coyote instead of a wild vampire. Number 9. American Loch Ness Monster. Lake Champlain is a huge body of water in both New York, Vermont and Quebec. The lake is a nice spot for boating and fishing, and it also happens to hold America's own version of the Loch Ness Monster. Legends of a monster living in Lake Champlain go back to the native Iroquois of the region. When French explorers arrived in the 18th century, they were warned against disturbing the waters of the lake as there was a giant serpent living inside. Then, in the later part of the 1800s, sightings of the monster began to seriously heat up. There was even a New York Times article about a railroad crew that had witnessed the serpent firsthand in Lake Champlain, saying that it had bright and silver scales that glistened in the sunlight. By 1992, at least 600 people had claimed to witness the Lake Champlain monster. There were even photos taken throughout the 90s, and that was when the comparison to the Loch Ness monster started. Many of the photos were too blurry or out of focus to properly show if there really was a monster, but despite the controversy, there's no doubt that something large and frightening definitely lives in Lake Champlain, whether it's a small family of marine reptiles or the Loch Ness monster's cousin. Number 8. Mermaids. Mermaids are supposed to be the stuff of legends. Nonetheless, there have been mermaid sightings documented ever since man could document anything. Mermaids have been sighted by people in the military, by tourists visiting the beach, and even by scuba divers. In fact, there have been so many convincing sightings of mermaids that they could very well be creatures of legend that actually exist. One of the most fascinating mermaid sightings came during World War II, when a group of Japanese soldiers spotted strange creatures during the 1940s while stationed in Indonesia. The soldiers all witnessed humanoid creatures with pink skin, fishy mouths, and the arms and legs of a frog. These weren't your typical mermaids, but they were definitely weird sea people that were apparently making gurgling and burping noises and then vanished into the water after being spotted. The local villagers already knew about these sea creatures and called them orang-ikan, which translates to English as man-fish. If local villagers knew about these creatures, it's likely that they were actually a legitimate species or natural phenomenon, but scientists didn't believe them. Now, these sightings obviously haven't been verified, but it really makes you wonder if an ancient race of sea people really had been living around the Indonesian islands, but have since gone extinct just like the dodo bird. Have you ever seen a mermaid? Or something similarly mythical that you weren't able to classify? What do you think it was? Tell me about it in the comment section below. Then, before you forget, hit the subscribe button now to stay on top of all the latest videos right here on Epic Wildlife. Number 7. The Devil Bird. The devil bird of Sri Lanka is shrouded in legend and mystery. Its cry is said to be an omen of death, with those who hear it shriek at night almost certain to lose a loved one the next day. The original story from Sri Lankan legend says that a mother lost her daughter in a tragic accident and was driven to such despair that she ran into the forest shrieking and turned into the devil bird, known by locals as the Ulama. Ever since, she has been screeching at night, acting as a harbinger of death. But the interesting thing is that the devil bird may actually exist. In 2001, a new type of bird was found that locals immediately recognized as the devil bird from legend. It turned out to be a spot-bellied owl, an extremely mysterious owl with a shrill call. This owl is almost never seen by people. Biologists don't really know much about it, and to this day, many locals in Sri Lanka still believe it to be the true devil bird, warning people of imminent doom with its ghostly night calls. Number 6. The Platypus. The platypus is a prime example of an animal that people thought was fake but turned out to be real. The first Western person to ever describe a platypus was a zoologist named George Shaw, who received a sample of the animal's pelt from Australia in 1799. According to Ripley's Believe It or Not, at first, George thought someone was playing a joke on him. That makes sense, because the platypus is so bizarre that it looks like it has to be a hoax. After all, it has a duck bill, flippers, and yet it's hairy. It couldn't possibly be real, right? At least, that's what Dr. Shaw thought. He assumed someone took the bill of a duck, the pelt of a mole or an otter, and then sent them to England as a practical joke. He even cut the skin apart to try and locate stitches, though of course he couldn't find any. George Shaw drew the first picture of the platypus, which actually turned out to be shockingly close even though he had never seen the animal before. Still, the English people were skeptical and didn't believe in the platypus for another 100 years after it was first discovered. Of course, people in Australia already knew about the platypus, but on the other side of the world, it wouldn't be until the late 1800s that the platypus was accepted as a real animal by the public. Number 5. The Takahe. The Takahe is a bird that came back from the dead. This large chicken-like creature was first described as a new species in 1851 by Dr. Walter Mantell after the second specimen was captured. At the time, Dr. Mantell wrote that it would be very unlikely for any other living specimens of the Takahe to be found. And he was right. According to New Zealand Geographic, 2 additional birds were found following its classification, and the bird was then declared extinct. The bird remained extinct until 1948, when someone spotted one in New Zealand. An expedition was mounted to find the bird, and a small flock of them were discovered in one of the remotest places in New Zealand, known as Fiordland. It turned out that this small, rather strange-looking bird had somehow survived extinction. With the help of conservationists, the Takahe's numbers increased, and fast forward to 2019 and there are about 418 of them still living on the planet, though they are still critically vulnerable. Number 4. A real unicorn. The remains of a real unicorn that lived roughly 30,000 years ago were just found in Kazakhstan. This is shocking for a few reasons. First, unicorns aren't supposed to exist. Secondly, the animal, which is known scientifically as the Elasmotherion sibiricus, was supposed to have gone extinct 350,000 years ago. But these newest fossilized remains show that the hairy unicorn was still wandering through ancient Russia 29,000 years before today. According to Andrei Shpansky from the Tomsk State University, Western Siberia was probably the last refuge for these mythical horned creatures. But I have some pretty bad news, as the real unicorns that lived on Earth didn't look quite like what you're probably imagining. Our fantasy images of unicorns aren't realistic, but it's likely that the legend of the unicorn was related to ancient people encountering this animal. This was an ancient species of rhinoceros that had exceptionally long horns. They were definitely not horses, they certainly weren't pure white, and they didn't have spiral horns made of gold and rainbows. Instead, they looked like woolly rhinos with curved tusks sticking out of their heads. But despite the differences, these beasts may have been the original inspiration for what we think of today as a mythical unicorn. Number 3. The Okapi. The creature found by the Russian miners has been referred to as a monster mummy, and nobody is really sure what it is. The Okapi is the strangest animal on Earth that absolutely has no business existing. In fact, if you were to show pictures of the Okapi to one of your friends, they would probably call you a liar and denounce the pictures as fake. After all, the Okapi has the black and white stripes of a zebra, it has the head of a giraffe, and it has the body shape of a deer. The Okapi is a weird amalgamation of half a dozen African animals, and it lives primarily in dense rainforests in Central Africa. Scientists didn't even know these animals existed until 1900, according to the San Diego Zoo. Okapis are secretive, they stay as far away from humans as possible, and it's been estimated that there are only about 25,000 of them left in the wild. They are the only relatives of the giraffe, and yeah, they 100% look like they've been photoshopped. If you ever encounter an Okapi in the wild, get a picture. People may think you're trying to fool them, but you'll know the truth. You found one of the most incredible real animals that looks like a hybrid species in the world. Number 2. A mysterious monster. A small group of miners working in a remote region of Russia recently discovered a bizarre animal that at first nobody believed really existed. The freaky creature was pulled out of the frozen sand in an area where the average daily temperature hovers around -45 degrees Fahrenheit. Because of the extreme cold, the mummified beast was discovered in pristine condition, with its fangs and claws still intact. Even more interesting is that the frozen sand in which the creature was discovered dates all the way back to the Mesozoic era, which means it could be between 252 and 66 million years old. After the discovery of the strange monster, it was taken back to the nearest major cities that it could be examined by scientists. Some estimate that the creature could be a previously unknown dinosaur, while others say it could be an extinct type of wolverine. Nobody really knows what the creature is, but one thing for sure, it's definitely real. Number 1. Real dragons. It's generally agreed that dragons don't exist. However, you might be interested to know just how close a real, breathing dragon was to existing on our planet. You have to remember that ancient cultures actually believed dragons existed, specifically in China, where they often interpreted the bones of dinosaurs as belonging to dragons. It wasn't until more recently that humans looked at dragons as mythical beasts. But these animals may have been a bit more real than we give them credit for. For example, when comparing the long dragons of ancient China, the drakon from ancient Greece, and the worm from Old England, we see that different cultures on Earth all had the exact same ideas of what dragons looked like. These creatures were long, they had very small legs, or no legs at all, and they looked a lot like snakes. Now, there happens to be fossil evidence suggesting that snakes evolved from lizards, and as they were evolving, their legs were shrinking and gradually disappearing. This actually fits perfectly with the description of ancient dragons. Now, if we look back a few million years, we'll be looking at the Earth during a time when the Titanoboa was the largest snake ever, with a monstrous length of 40 feet. If you make the assumption that at some point the Titanoboa may have been even larger and had short little legs, it basically could have been a real-life dragon, or pretty close to it. Number 8. Spiny bush viper. Native to Central Africa, the spiny bush viper is a relatively small venomous snake with spiny scales. Found in semi-arboreal locations, they love climbing trees and hunting for mammals, frogs, lizards and birds. Having what is known as a prehensile tail, they can hang upside down from branches, but be careful when trekking through rainforests, woodlands and swamps where they like to hang out. Their venom has neurotoxins that can cause organ hemorrhaging. Only growing up to 29 inches, the males of the species have a longer, more slender body. The females, who reach only 23 inches, are more stout, but both have triangular heads and green or brownish keeled scales that give them a bristly appearance. Excellent climbers, they can be found at high elevations and frequent Uganda, Tanzania and Kenya. They are a nocturnal species, basking in the sun during the day, but at night they like to ambush their prey by hanging from trees or hiding in an S shape before lunging and striking. An elusive creature, the spiny bush viper keeps to itself, which makes it hard for scientists to determine their lifespan in the wild. Number 7. Rainbow boa. Wondering how the Brazilian rainbow boa got its name? The medium-sized snake native to the Amazon River basin has beautiful iridescent skin that refracts light and creates a rainbow-coloured effect. A brown or reddish snake with black stripes on its head, they also have large spurs on their head. Mostly found in humid woodlands or open savannas, they ambush and constrict their prey, which are usually rodents, birds or lizards. A stunning snake, they usually have either dark spots or striped patterns. This solitary snake prefers to avoid interaction, but when they encounter other snakes, they defend themselves by striking out in anger. But it is their rainbow-coloured hue that garners them the most attention, or rather their ability to glow in rainbow colours in certain lighting situations. But they do not have multicoloured pigments on their body. Instead, they have microscopic ridges on their scales that refract light, giving them their dazzling iridescence. But don't get too smitten. Their ability to see heat, like an infrared camera, means they will see you before you see them. What's the coolest snake you've ever seen? And where was it? Tell me about it in the comments section below. Then, remember to subscribe to Epic Wildlife if you haven't already for more incredible content. Number 6. Paradise Flying Snake. If you're not a fan of creepy crawlers, then the Paradise Flying Snake might make you extra squeamish. So, would it make you feel better if you knew that this type of snake can't actually fly, but only glides through the air? These snakes use either body contortions or free fall from high places to glide from place to place. To prepare for takeoff, they slither to the end of a branch. Dangling in a J shape, they propel themselves from the branch, forming into an S shape and then flatten their bodies to trap more air. As they undulate back and forth, they can make turns in the air as they glide. But why would a snake need to fly, or at least glide? Scientists think they do this to escape predators, or to move from tree to tree without having to crawl down to the forest floor, though some scientists also believe it is to hunt. With 5 recognised species of flying snakes found from western India to Indonesia, they rarely descend from the canopy. And due to their unique method of travel, they don't really need to. When a group of scientists set out to understand just how the Paradise Flying Snake could glide, they put reflective tape on their bodies, using high-speed cameras to capture their movements. Although they already knew the snakes flattened their bodies to achieve lift, the scientists also discovered the snakes could make complex maneuvers, undulating their bodies from side to side and up and down, as well as moving their tails above and below the levels of their head. It is their ability to wriggle in 3 dimensions that prevents them from spinning from side to side or falling head over tail. Forget snakes on a plane. The Paradise Flying Snake can do well enough on its own thanks to its unique method of travel. Number 5. Spider-tailed horned viper. When a scientist came across a dead snake with what looked like a spider on its body in 1970 at the Field Museum in Chicago, he was puzzled by what turned out to be a bizarre growth on its tail. After closer examination of what he thought was a Persian horned viper, he found that the oval knob-like structure that he couldn't be sure wasn't simply a result of the animal's genes or some sort of cancerous growth. Almost 40 years later, another such dead snake was discovered with the same growth. After more analysis, scientists realized that the growth was an extreme form of animal mimicry, where the snake evolved to have this growth resemble the prey of another species. The reason? Many other animals waggle their tails as a decoy trick for predators, but these snakes are equally deceptive. To catch unsuspecting rivals into becoming their meal, when another animal intent on eating the so-called spider moved in for a quick meal, the snake was ready and waiting to pounce. Because both specimens were found dead, researchers needed to find a living spider-tailed snake to study. It took them to the Zagros Mountains in Turkey and Kurdistan to find one, but it wasn't easy. With their rough, corrugated scales that blend into the gypsum and limestone, scientists had their work cut out for them, but they tracked a pair of the vipers in western Iran. They trapped and removed one of the snakes, later releasing it into an enclosure where they could watch. As the snake swooshed its tail along the ground, the spider-like growth skittered along, looking very much like a spider. Several birds were instantly fooled by the snake's movements and became meals for the reptile. Although other species, like the death adder and Saharan sand viper, do have similar traits, the snake-tailed viper is the only one with a strange growth that they use to trick unsuspecting animals. Number 4. Barbados thread snake. From one of the most unique snakes to the smallest, our list of strange snakes runs the gamut. Take the thread snake. Their name might give away the fact that they are not only short and slender, but they are also so small they are sometimes mistaken for earthworms. Also sometimes called worm snakes or slender blind snakes, they are often found on oceanic islands. Scientists believe the Barbados thread snake is near the smallest possible size for any snake. Being any smaller would mean they could not reproduce or forage for the insect prey they need to survive. The species is in fact so small that their mouths can barely open, and even when they do, they can only eat microscopic sized insects. A burrowing snake, they spend their days squirming in soil, which not only serves as a good place to hide out, but also to stay hydrated. But that doesn't mean survival isn't a challenge for the diminutive snake species. The mother, being so small, can only bear one single egg, which means the survival of the species is precarious at best. Measuring from only 0.08 to 0.5 inches, their eggs are only as big as a grain of rice. A rare snake that has never been studied ecologically, the thread snake remains mysterious, with very few specimens seen or collected for study. Number 3. Blue coral snake. One look at the blue coral snake and it's obvious you've got a unique snake on your hands. But its appearance isn't the only fascinating thing about it. The snake has a unique kind of venom, and with the largest venom glands of any snake, ones that extend more than a quarter of its body length, it's safe to say you might want to steer clear of this vibrantly coloured reptile. Don't be charmed by its eye-catching black and blue hue. They strike quickly, and their venom's toxins affect victims nearly immediately. But how did their venom get to be so deadly? Apparently, they often eat other venomous snakes, so they had to adapt their venom to make it even more fast-acting, so they could take down their enemies and avoid getting bitten back. Preying on other venomous snakes is not only their lifestyle habit, but they seem to turn it into something of a game. And the fact that the venom doesn't kill right away, but instead paralyzes their prey so they cannot move, is enough to make one's blood run cold. Even though this helps the blue coral snake to survive in the wild, their toxic venom might actually help humans. Scientists continue to study the venom, and more importantly, how it affects sodium channels in nerves. Those same channels are how humans feel pain. So, if researchers can determine how it works, they could possibly find therapeutic uses for it. Still, that doesn't mean you want to go picking up a blue coral snake anytime soon. Leave the research to the professionals and be satisfied with observing this eye-catching snake from afar. Number 2. Red spitting cobra. A species of snake native to Africa, the red spitting cobra is another strikingly coloured snake. With a bright salmon colouring that contrasts with its broad black throat band, this snake can reach lengths of up to almost 5 feet. Other specimens, including those found in the southern regions of Kenya, have different colouring ranging from orange, red and blue bands to yellow, pinkish or even steel grey bodies. It's clear to see that there is a wide variety when it comes to colouring in the species. What they do have in common though is that they are mostly found in East Africa and tend to hang out near waterholes above sea level. A fast and alert snake, the adults are nocturnal, while juveniles like to be more active during the day. One macabre fact about this species is that they can sometimes be cannibalistic, which could be why adults and young snakes are seen at different times of the day to avoid becoming a meal for their older counterparts. When they feel threatened, they take on a typical cobra stance by rearing up and displaying their hood. They are also known to hiss and spray venom in the eyes of their intruder, which causes burning pain and blindness in other animals. Luckily, there aren't normally fatalities in humans. Their venom has both neurotoxins and cytotoxins, which can still cause disfigurement in those who have been bitten. Living up to their name, the red spitting cobra squeezes the muscles around its venom gland to force small jets of venom through small holes in their fangs. They are definitely a species you want to avoid. In experiments by scientists, they found that the spitting cobra was able to hit the researchers' goggle-covered eyes 10 out of 10 times. Those are odds you just can't beat. Number 1. California red-sided garter snake. Even if you happen to have a fear of snakes, you can't deny that some of the species are beautiful. Take the California red-sided garter snake. The combination of vibrant red, yellow and black colouring is hard to miss. Luckily, garter snakes are considered harmless. Found in forests, shrublands and wetlands, some species of garter snake are found further north than any other land-dwelling reptile in Canada. As for the California red-sided garter snake, they are usually about 3 feet long and quite skinny. Not only are they striped, but they also have spots or blotches on their backs. Unlike their Canadian counterparts, they are found in marshes or dunes along the coast. When they are approached by predators, they often retreat into the marshes, streams or ponds they like to live near. Considered both a predator and prey, they like to eat meat, insects and eggs. But they need to look out for snapping turtles and bullfrogs, who look at them as a tasty meal. Luckily for the snake's case, they release toxins with every bite, but it doesn't affect humans much. Their unique keeled scales, which have a ridge down the middle, makes them more camouflaged and more likely to survive longer in the wild because of it. Maybe that's a good thing because this California native is quite the looker by snake standards. Number 10. Whale Saviour. Marine biologist Nan Hauser was swimming off the coast of the Cook Islands when out of nowhere she found herself being lifted out of the ocean on top of a humpback whale's huge head. It was a 10-minute battle in which the marine biologist was nudged, bumped with the whale's belly and swiped with its huge pectoral fins. After spending 28 years underwater with whales, she had never experienced a whale so adamant about keeping a human so close to it. This was actually a bit dangerous, as the whale was so powerful that if it had bumped her a little too hard with its flipper or tail, it very easily could have shattered her bones or even burst her organs. And if she had been held under its pectoral fin for too long, she would have easily drowned. During this entire encounter, she had no idea what was going on. It wasn't until afterwards that she realised that on the other side of the humpback whale was a huge tiger shark. It was only after reviewing the encounter on video that the marine biologist realised that the whale had been trying to keep her safe from the deadly shark. And this isn't the first time that a humpback whale has come to the rescue. A humpback whale in 2009 was caught on camera shielding a lonely seal from a crew of mean killer whales. According to Live Science, this could have something to do with the whale's natural instincts to protect its own calves. It also might have something to do with the fact that humpbacks and orcas are mortal enemies. Number 9. Angel Dog. The particulars about how a dog managed to save a boy from certain death is something amazing. This incident unfolded in Canada when a golden retriever saved her owner from being mauled to death by a deadly cougar in the backyard of their home. This happened in Boston Bar, roughly 130 miles from Vancouver. As reported by CNN, the dog, whose name just so happens to be Angel, was only 18 months old when she leapt into action and saved her boy owner from the rampaging cougar that was charging at him for the kill. Of course, this is just one of those things you have to deal with when you live in British Columbia. The boy had been outside with his dog around 5:30 that night to gather some firewood from the backyard when the attack occurred. This goes to prove that even at such a young age, a dog can't help but protect its owner at all costs. The dog intercepted the cougar. The two animals got into a fight underneath the deck of the house, and luckily there was an officer in the area who responded to the family's panicked 911 call and was able to save the dog from the cougar. Even after sustaining some pretty bad injuries, including bites and scratches, Angel the Golden Retriever went on to make a full recovery. This is just more proof that dogs truly are man's best friend. Has your dog ever protected you? Let me know your dog stories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Number 8. Attacked by lions. Saving a person from one small cougar is definitely commendable, but check out this next dog that saved the life of a shepherd after he was attacked by a group of 3 lions in Gujarat, India. According to the story from India Today, the shepherd was on the outskirts of his village, tending to his sheep, when the 3 lions appeared from the wilderness and decided he looked like a yummy snack. Luckily, this guy had his loyal companion dog with him, and the dog actually managed to save his life. Although, it was kind of the shepherd's fault. He had actually tried to stop the lions from getting too close to his sheep, and that was when they turned their attention to him. But even after the lions set their sights on him, the guy walked away with just a couple of scrapes on his arm. And as for the dog, it was completely fine. All the dog had needed to do was bark its heart out to distract the lions and to alert the other local townspeople. The dog's barking drew a huge crowd of spectators. The 3 lions got too nervous to continue their attack on the defenseless shepherd and his flock, and in the end everyone was okay, and the lions would live to terrorize another day. Number 7. Dolphins saving dogs. We're going to flip the script for the next one. Rather than a dog saving a human, let's talk about a couple of dolphins that recently saved a dog from a certain underwater doom. A Doberman named Turbo recently got into some trouble when he became stranded in the waters off of Marco Island in South Florida. According to Turbo's owner, he had somehow gotten out of the yard and escaped on a Sunday night. He wasn't found until Monday afternoon, almost drowning in a nearby canal. The dog may have been in the water for as long as 15 hours, and if it hadn't been for the help of 2 curious dolphins keeping the dog safe, he almost certainly would have drowned. There was no way that Turbo could have tread water for 15 hours, and he simply couldn't get out of the canal because he was stuck. The dolphins held him upright, they kept him from slipping under the water and drowning, and finally when someone came across the scene on Monday afternoon, they were able to wade into the canal and rescue the dog, with the help of 2 generous dolphins of course. Thankfully, Turbo made a full recovery, and the dolphins were hailed as local heroes. Number 6. Cat saves baby. Dogs aren't the only animals that can be heroes, cats can too. Check out this cat named Gatabella, who recently saved the life of a baby. The incident was even caught on security video and uploaded online. In the video, you can see the toddler somehow got out of its crib and was crawling towards a dangerous flight of stairs. The cat has been resting peacefully on the couch, but when it saw the kid moving towards danger, it leapt into action. The cat actually lashed itself onto the child, maneuvering the baby in such a way that it ended up crawling away from the stairs and back into the centre of the room. But here's the deal, it's hard to say if the cat saved the baby on purpose or just inadvertently. It could be that the cat simply wanted to play with the child, so when the cat saw the baby moving across the room, it thought it would be a good time to pounce. Then again, its benevolent cat instincts could very well have kicked in, and that could be why it saved the day. Number 5. The gorilla and the baby. At a zoo in Illinois, a female gorilla was declared a hero after she carried a young child who fell into her enclosure all the way to safety. According to ABC News, the child slipped away from his mother, managed to wriggle through the barrier at the Western Lowland Gorilla Pit, and then fell right in with the giant gorillas. But rather than being ripped apart, he ended up being saved. The kid fell in front of Binti Joa, an 8-year-old lady gorilla. She picked him up gently around the waist and carried him to a nearby door where rescuers were already prepared to rush in and save the child. This is extraordinary because there were 6 other gorillas living inside the exhibit at the time, and if it hadn't been for Binti's quick thinking, one of the other gorillas could have done some serious damage to the child. The gorilla even had her own baby on her back during the entire encounter, highlighting her maternal instincts to protect the child, even if it wasn't hers or even part of her own species. The boy actually suffered some pretty bad injuries from the fall. He had a broken hand, cuts all over his face, and he had to spend 4 days in recovery at the hospital. What's even more amazing is that this happened in 1996, and all these years later the heroic gorilla is still living at the Brookfield Zoo. She's now almost 30 years old with her own grandchildren. Number 4. Piglet the hero. pigs are heroes too. A heroic pig named Lucky recently saved the life of her owner and her owner's 2 grandchildren after a raging fire began to consume their mobile home early on a Sunday morning. According to the report in Time magazine, Lucky began squealing just after 4:30 a.m. Ina Fowler knew something was wrong immediately, as Lucky usually waited until the morning to wake up the family. Not only was the pig screaming, but he was jumping up and down, running to the door and then back to the bed, and ramming into Ina extremely hard. The pig was panicking because the mobile home was filled with smoke and slowly burning down. If it hadn't been for the swift actions of this pet pig, the entire family probably would have been consumed by the flames. And even though the fire was so out of control that the mobile home and all their belongings within were burned up, at least the family and their beloved pig went on to live another day. Number 3. Cow defends honor. A cow recently showed more humanity than 2 despicable men when it came to the rescue of a woman being stabbed to death. It's not clear exactly where this happened, but the video was posted by the New York Post online, and they claimed that the men had been stabbing the young girl to death, all because she had committed the crime of eloping with a man without first getting their permission. Pay for her elopement, the men, her uncle and father, decided to murder the girl. But in the middle of committing this horrific act, a cow came to the girl's rescue. The cow trampled them, stepped on their faces, and tried to subdue them, and in doing so proved itself to be more human than the supposed men it was attacking. Unfortunately, the girl's life wasn't actually saved, but at least the cow showed us just how much more compassionate animals can be than those of our own species. So far as we know, the 2 men were forced to go on the run after the incident was captured on film. Number 2. The family goat. When a 10-year-old girl named Abigail from Arkansas was given a goat for her birthday, her father was not particularly excited. The girl's father told Inside Edition that he didn't approve of the goat at first. However, after the goat saved the entire family from certain doom, the father changed his tune. Abigail named her goat Speedy, and Speedy turned out to be a real lifesaver just 2 days after becoming part of the family. Abigail was asleep in the living room at home with her goat on a Saturday when Speedy suddenly woke her up and began jumping on her legs and chest, almost as if it was trying to pummel her to death. But actually, the goat had been trying to warn Abigail that the house was on fire. It took the girl a minute to wake up, but once she did, she realized that the entire house was filled with smoke. There was fire pouring in through the windows. As it turned out, the garage had somehow caught fire. But thanks to the quick thinking and bravery of the goat, Abigail was able to wake the rest of her family, and everyone escaped through a bedroom window. The fire department showed up a few minutes later and put out the fire, but just like the case we talked about before with the hero pig, everything they owned was destroyed. Of course, they still had their lives, and that was something that they could thank Speedy the goat for. Number 1. Dog to the rescue. A man recently got a second chance at life all thanks to his loyal dog. A German shepherd named Sadie has recently been declared a hero after saving her owner from a heart attack. Sadie was originally surrendered to an animal refuge center in New Jersey after her owner had been forced to give her up. Just a few months later, a man named Brian adopted her. Brian claimed to feel a special bond with Sadie, and the 2 of them hit it off right away. Shortly after taking Sadie home, Brian suffered a stroke. But Sadie was there to rescue his life. She actually dragged Brian across the room to where his cell phone was so that he could pick up the phone and call for help. If it hadn't been for Sadie and her amazing intelligence, Brian may have died right there and then on the floor. Then, after Brian called the police for assistance, his dog stayed with him the entire time, licking his face and keeping him awake. Even cuter is that Sadie was forced to stay with family while Brian recovered, but the 2 of them used FaceTime every night to stay in contact. Thanks for watching. Aren't animals amazing? Have you ever been saved by your pet? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. How far would you go to save your pet? Would you give up the tip of your pinky if it could save your pet?